Okay, so following my series of OF girl videos that I've done recently, I've had quite a few comments of people asking me to expand on my opinion on the industry and why I hate on OF and corn in general. I know it's quite a controversial topic to talk about. I will be using phrases such as cornography and OF to help kind of get around the YouTube TOS because obviously they don't really like it. But most importantly, I just wanted to remind people to remain respectful in the comments section. This is just a talking point for me that kind of means a lot to me, and there's no reason, to be spreading hate, and I don't know, just be normal in the comments, really. And I do know a lot of people disagree with me on this subject, and honestly, you're entitled to your own opinion. I will try and keep things, factual, as well as giving my opinion here and there, but ultimately, this is being made for the right reasons. I am ultimately aiming to educate more people on why the corn industry leads to the objectification of women and the subordination of women in society. So if this is something you're interested in, then hi, welcome, fun. It's going to be quite a chatty video as well, so I hope you're ready for that. It's not going to be my usual clips everywhere. It can't really be, because what am I meant to show, really? So a good place to start, I guess, is what are my beliefs? What do I believe in? I have a lot of people often come to my comments, hear my views and call me misogynistic. They think I'm a TERF. They think that I hate women, and all of those things are greatly, greatly wrong. I believe that the corn industry has had a detrimental effect on society, and I actually don't think it can be reversed. I think we are so far gone that any amount of reversal is just impossible. I think we've seen the effects already, and we're going to continue to see the effects in the future, especially with, the amount of technology that we have now and how a lot of children are exposed to it a lot more than they used to be. I believe that the corn industry has ultimately made women be viewed as sexual objects, which I guess is something that we know, but I don't think people fully understand the extent of that. I don't believe that there is any such thing as ethical corn. I think at the end of the day, every element of corn, whether it's OF or it's corn industry or it's big mainstream companies or it's independent companies, I think ultimately everything results in the same result, which is women being viewed as objects. I also believe that I don't think women are at fault when it comes to the industry, even when it comes to OF creators who are making a lot of money. People often think that I hate these women for the job that they're doing. Absolutely not, and we will kind of get into that more as the video goes on. And although I do believe that it affects women most terribly in society, I do also believe that the effect it's having on men is also not spoken about. And although these kind of effects are different on men and women, they are both as terrible and both contributing to a worse society. Now, I know online you've probably seen a lot of YouTube accounts, for example, the Whatever podcast, who preach that they're anti-cornography and blatantly not, with the way they kind of thumbnail their videos, and they kind of try and pull in people that are clearly corn-ridden in their head to then preach about how they're anti-corn, but they make all their money from bringing on corn stars. I think there are a lot of people online who do preach about being anti-cornography for all the wrong reasons. A lot of people don't really care about the effect it has on women, rather that they are annoyed that women are now making money from themselves, especially when it comes to the likes of OnlyFans, because women can literally do that from their own home. So a lot of people ask me, why do I have these beliefs? Why do I believe all these things? And why am I so loud and yappy about it? I thought the best place to start is my experience with cornography, my experience with men that have consumed too much cornography. And yeah, it kind of gives a little bit of a background. This doesn't mean to say, though, when I talk about my experiences with men, for example, who have had addictions, that is a great point for people to say, well, you've just had terrible experiences. Because although I can see that as a counter argument, when people are like, looks like you've just had bad experiences, doesn't mean that everything is bad to do with corn. Yeah, obviously, I don't think every single element of cornography is terrible. I reckon you could kind of suck out some parts that aren't that bad. But when it comes to my experiences with men who have used too much cornography, I think it is a great summary and a great example of how terrible of an effect it has. So when I was 16, I got into my first relationship. I hadn't been in any relationship. I hadn't been involved with anybody. I was completely new to men. I felt like I was quite late to getting involved with boys, to be honest, but I never really had that much of an interest. But the first time I had ever been shown anything online, corn wise, was when I went to this friend's house when I was around 14, 15 after school, and he just showed me it on his laptop, and I was there like, okay, this is greatly uncomfortable, and I felt so strange about it. I don't think I was really traumatized. I was just like, okay, I didn't even know this existed until then. And what's interesting is a lot of parents seem to think that they are very aware of what their child is doing on their phone, what their child is consuming, what their child is being exposed to, but I completely disagree. According to the BBFC, 75% of parents believe that their children has not been exposed to pornography, and they believe that they know what their children is viewing online. But of those children, 53% of them admitted that they have seen pornography online at some point. And the issue with this is not only have they now seen it, but it is proven that children just do not have the brain capacity to understand and process what they are seeing online. That's why they're not allowed to watch 18 plus movies. That's why they're not meant to be allowed to access these sites. But I mean, with it only being a button that says, are you 18? And that's all you need to proceed. It's not exactly, foolproof. And of those children, only 50% of the ones that have seen it will actually then go on to talk to their parents to say that they've seen it at a young age. And funnily enough, when I was first shown it when I was younger, I didn't go and tell my parents. As soon as I'd seen it, I was like, well, I'm in trouble now if my parents know. They're going to view me differently. It's like you think you can't let your parents know that you've seen it, so you don't talk to them about it. You just keep it quiet. And that's not a parent's fault necessarily. I genuinely don't, for example, think that because my parents didn't know that I had seen it at a really young age, that makes them bad parents. I think especially with my parents' generation, a lot of them I don't think have fully realised yet what the internet is like, especially when I was a child. I don't think my parents knew how bad the internet was and what I was being exposed to online. And although I was exposed to it at a young age, it kind of got worse and worse for me myself in terms of what I ended up seeing online, because I became extremely desensitized. So anything I saw, I was just like, well, this isn't much. This isn't really that bad. And at the time, I didn't even realise the effects that corn had on people at all. I only started to realise how bad it was when I was maybe 16, 17, when I got into my first relationship with somebody who had clearly been consuming pornography for years and years, even at the age of 16. I was with this one guy who literally, he could not get at the age of 16 when I was in a relationship at all. Like he could not get aroused by me due to the severe amount of pornography that he had been consuming even at that age, which I didn't even realize would be a possibility, because you don't assume that at 16 people have been, exposed to like a severe amount of online content. But this person literally could not stop watching it. They couldn't stop watching it. This affected kind of how he was viewing other women, which in turn affected my self-esteem and my confidence in general, because I was just like, damn, like I look nothing like these women that he is watching every day on the screen. And it's horrible. And I think people kind of don't understand what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who has such a bad addiction to porn, because you end up being with someone who is somehow very, very, very overly sexual, but doesn't want to have sex with you, only wants to watch. And I, for one, always felt like I was meant to almost sympathize with that and treat it as a real addiction. But actually, scientists have kind of debated on whether it is an actual addiction or not, rather an obsession rather than a scientific addiction. And I always like to run with that, because I always felt like if it's an addiction, I have to sympathize with this. And quite frankly, I never could sympathize with it. Obviously, now I look back and I'm like, damn, he should have just been kept more safe online rather than being exposed to all of that. But at the same time, when you're a woman or a man who is dealing with a partner with an addiction, you don't really think about, oh, poor them. You're just like, damn, this is having an effect on me. I remember like he couldn't have sex unless he had got pornography on his phone before we had sex. And, a lot of people will use that to be like, yeah, that's because you're mid, that's because you're ugly. I feel like they're the top comments I've ever got when I've ever mentioned this story. But in reality, that's not a normal thing for, a 16-year-old relationship that you've just got into, and you can't even perform because you are so in at that age is actually very, very scary. And I remember kind of what made me realise that some boys are absolutely too far gone is when he made a comment to me about the appearance just of my body and being like, yeah, it's not really what I expected. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're bro. And when I used to ask him about why are you so, why are you so addicted? Why can't you stop? Because it used to really upset me. He'd be like, I'm really into petite women. I can't stop. I'm really into petite women and large. That's legitimately a reason I got given. Bear in mind I'm 5'2" and don't really weigh that much. Especially back then, I was a very petite person. So you were starting to see why I'm like, my self-esteem is slowly going down the drain. And why am I telling you all this? You may be asking. Because for me, at the age of 16, being in a relationship with someone who did not know physically how to stop himself off has had a detrimental impact on the person that I am today. Not only has it kind of made me research into pornography and why it's bad, but also just on my general self-esteem and my fear now that my partners I've been with after that aren't attracted to me for me and are secretly watching porn behind my back. Now, I know a lot of people, when it comes to relationships, they say, it's your own prerogative. It's normal. You do what you want to do, which I've never really personally understood. For me, I think obviously is normal. We all do it, we all do it. However, it's not a normal thing. People often think, when I kind of explain, when I'm in a relationship, I don't want my partner to be consuming pornography. They think that I'm controlling. They think it is abusive, almost. Very strange. But in reality, I don't think it makes much sense. Yes, it's normal to masturbate, and no partner should be telling another partner that they can't masturbate. It's down to the content that you are consuming. No one will convince me that it is normal to sit online when you're in a relationship and beat your meat or DJ the VJ to people having sex. That, to me, with all the things we're about to talk about, that's just not for me. Obviously, relationships have different boundaries, and I can't sit there if two people are comfortable with each other doing that, in a relationship. That's none of my business. That's your relationship. But what I would say is, even if you are both comfortable with it, even if the woman is okay with the man doing that, it doesn't change the impacts that, number one, that's going to have on the man's head, and number two, the impact that is having on society in general. So that's the first thing that I would say. And another kind of reason why I'm so against it, in terms of my experiences with men, aren't just in relationships. From my experience, I'm quite lucky. I always was terrified that I would get into a relationship with someone and they wouldn't be able to stop watching it. I was literally convinced I'm never going to find a partner that doesn't watch it or doesn't see the problem with it. Or I would be scared that I'm with someone who says they don't watch it and then they are watching it, or they say they don't watch it but secretly they wish they could watch it even if they don't. I've always found it quite difficult to find men especially, and sometimes women, but to talk to and have a similar understanding of why pornography is terrible, because a lot of people bat it down to just going, it's personal preference, some couples watch it together, etc. And I'm like, you watch it together, fine, that's great that you're both on the same page, but that doesn't mean the page you're on is correct. The effects that it is having on society is still very much there. And what I found also interesting about this back and forth debate about whether pornography is okay or not is people often like to say, well, it's personal preference, that's just your opinion. But I've never really found anyone present some statistics towards me that are in favour of pornography. There's never been any arguments that are backed up by stats and figures, but one search online can show you a plethora of stats, figures on why it's bad for women, why it's bad for men. The increase in pornography use means that a lot of men are having an erectile dysfunction by the time they're 30, which is a whole separate issue we'll talk about later. But again, in terms of talking about my experiences with men, something I found very interesting, and I often talk about a lot because I've not heard that many people talk about it, but in my opinion, I can talk to someone sometimes, man or woman, and I can tell verbatim straight away that you consume too much online material. It's sometimes glaringly obvious. Now, sometimes it can be in a passing conversation because someone will make a joke and I'm like, yeah, you're an addict. Or sometimes it could be, as I'm sure a lot of people will relate to, in a kind of experience with a man, and they'll do or say something where you're like, you need to get offline. You really need to get offline because I can tell you beat your pud way too often. So I'll give you some kind of stories that, I'm sorry if my parents are watching, please click off, but can really kind of back up my point here when it comes to, I think men take their pornography use, and women of course, into the bedroom, and it's not helpful. A lot of people like to say, oh, but I've learned a lot from it, man. Yeah, we can tell you've learned a lot from pornography, because I can tell you right now, if you're getting your sex tips and your sex advice offline, you're not learning much. To be honest, you're really not. Firstly, if you are consuming too much pornography, man or woman, it makes you I don't know the actual stat for this, but you are more likely not going to be able to perform and finish in an actual relationship. Number two, a lot of the time people are consuming really aggressive and rough and quite shady content, meaning that they try and take it in the bedroom, and more often than not, it doesn't really work. I have a specific memory of this guy that I was seeing a few years ago who, for some reason, thought it would be a good idea to slap me across the face, just randomly, like as hard as he could. My ears were actually ringing, and I remember just thinking, like, I'm never seeing this person again, because in my head I was like, you got that from, didn't you? Because there's no way that you genuinely thought that that was a good idea. And this is the problem. A lot of time, people in their head, when they're having sex, when they've consumed too much pornography, are living as if this is like a porn video. And women do it too, because obviously women feel like they have to perform more, they have to show up for the man more, especially when they know that that man is consuming a copious amount of online material. I feel like women feel more obliged to put on a performance, and as do men. I think the pressure is there from both sides. Talking of pressure when it comes to the effects of pornography, this leads me to talk about unrealistic body standards and why it affects both men and women here. Now, although I do believe it has more of an effect on women, because I think women's beauty standards have kind of always seemed to move alongside what's kind of trending in porn, or what is sought after in pornography, I do and have to acknowledge the effect that this also does have on men. And a lot of men growing up thinking that their packages aren't big enough because of what they themselves have been consuming online, or thinking they have to perform for hours and hours long, and that is normal. Or again, they just take their advice and pick things out of pornography to learn for when it comes to the bedroom, which is just ultimately the wrong thing to be doing. But when it comes to women, I think it's become so prevalent now in media in general that women have to live up to pornography standards. And there are so many things that you can talk about here that you've probably seen in comment sections from reels. For example, the whole "is it pink" thing, basically asking women if their genitals are pink, because that is the beauty standard in pornography, because women have their is bleached to achieve the pink look, because most women, unless you haven't hit puberty yet, don't really have that. That's not really a normal thing. But because so many people consume pornography and so many people consume the standards that we see in pornography, they assume that that's what you're going to look like in real life. And, you know, I've seen porn stars and OF models literally do interviews where they talk about the fact that they've had labiaplasty and they've had their asshole bleached and they've had their vagina bleached and they've had this work done and they've had this work done. And when, you know, the amount of men that are consuming this online, which is, by the way, I don't think a lot of people understand, is a huge amount. Hub is actually the fourth most visited site aside from Google, Facebook, and YouTube. So I think you can kind of get a sense now of the amount, you know, of online adult content that people are consuming. And if we look at that then compared to the beauty standards, you can see how that is slowly going to creep onto women in real life. I mean, I myself don't make OF content. I don't think put very sexual posts of myself online, yet still I will get comments that ask me weird things or have weird things to say about my appearance, and they're very critical of me. And you can just tell a lot of these comments are deep rooted in pornographic standards for women. I think for me, body standards created by pornography is one of the biggest issues that I have, because I, for one, grew up really, really insecure about my entire body purely because of the stuff that I had seen online. And I know for a fact a lot of women experience this. I've seen so many women talk about how they don't even want to have sex, or they don't even want anyone to see their body because they're so insecure about how their body or their genitals don't look like it does in pornography. And I feel it's very interesting because our education system is actually terrible. We learn that men's balls drop and their voices get deeper, and that women get hair. That's about it. You don't learn, though, that, you know, women hit puberty and their vaginas change. And in fact, what you do see in pornography is not realistic at all. And most people in the porn industry have had work done to every part of their body. In fact, a lot of kind of these big industries, these big companies are very, very fussy and specific about who they will work with. And that's why a lot of women, when they want to work with these big mainstream companies, end up getting work done. But I mean, I, for one, didn't even know what a labiaplasty was until I was like 14 or 15, which sounds quite young. But, you know, considering we learn about the changes that men have to their body, I thought it was really strange that we don't actually learn what women's actually look like. And it's very, very, very shocking to realize that loads of men clearly that have never seen or actually been near a real don't even know what actual women look like. The amount of comments I see online where men kind of out themselves for believing that a woman's body count will have an effect on how her vagina looks is wild, is absolutely insane. Men will see a woman with, you know, an outie, should we say, and they'll think that she's ran through and that she's like a million men. The education system is truly flawed, and that is definitely fueled again by the porn industry, because every woman in porn pretty much, unless it's fetish content, has the same type of body, has the same type of genitals, has the same just unrealistic bodies that, you know, people now believe that women should be attaining naturally. And I think what's scary about pornography promoting really unrealistic expectations of women is that despite it being unrealistic, and also alongside it glorifying, you know, violence against women and sexism and even sometimes racism, a recent survey found that over half of boys and over a third of girls that have consumed it believe that this was an accurate depiction of real life, which is terrifying when we've already established that children don't even have the capacity to understand what they're seeing. Now, again, back to kind of children and young teenagers viewing this content online and how it's very, very bad for society. I think the consumption of pornography and even just the objectification of women on social media is contributing to this blurry line when it comes to consent. I mean, some of the biggest categories online are just borderline, and a lot of the time you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There has been reports of actual cases where women and victims have been uploaded onto porn sites and it would have been an actual unconsensual experience that they can't even get removed, because the system when it comes to porn sites is pretty much impossible to get stuff removed. So imagine being a victim of or SA and then having that videoed and circulating online. Like, it's actually insane. And even when it comes to the videos that aren't actually, you know, cases of actual rape, the fact that so much of pornography now is kind of centered around violence towards women, tricking women, just being aggressive towards women is very, very concerning as you know, being one of the top categories. Not forgetting another top category being very incest based. I mean, some of the biggest categories are like stepmom and stepdad, which is, to me, I mean, absolutely mind-boggling. Imagine knowing that some members of your family, your parents, for example, are consuming pornography and you actually have no idea what it is that they are watching. There has been cases where OF women have had their OF purchased by their stepdad or biological dad. And like, yes, they are rare, but it just proves how much it is affecting people and how people just end up living in this insane fantasy where they don't realize what they're doing is actually, I mean, illegal, right, and disgusting and wrong. Obviously, you know, when it comes to pornography and it being a massive act, we see women kind of responding to aggressive behavior and violent behavior and very ultimately rapey behavior with responses of positivity and kind of being happy that that is what they are receiving, kind of meaning that a lot of people grow up thinking that that is something that women just want, resulting in us having cases where girls and women have come forward saying that their partner has done something to them because they just assumed that the woman would like it because it's what they have been watching. I think in general pornography does just breed a lack of empathy towards women because, you know, they're the object of desire in these videos. And I think if you are continuously watching this type of content, I find it hard to believe that you go outside and you view women as normal people when every day you come home and you jack your to women online. And I think it's clear to see the lack of empathy that a lot of men have for women when it comes to pornography and as a result of pornography. I mean, we have porn stars such as Mia Khalifa coming forward to talk about her experience in the industry, and men's first response is, well, you fucking did it. You made the decision. Like, yeah, no Sherlock, we know that, but there is this thing called empathy, and we can also realise that these women are a victim of the industry, an industry made by men for men, which kind of links to a question that I get asked a lot, which is, so you just hate women then? Well, no, because I, for example, have a lot of respect for people like Mia Khalifa. I have a lot of empathy for people like her who have been in the industry and are now using their platform to talk about why it is bad. I don't hate Mia Khalifa for having done it. In fact, if anything, I see her as a victim to the industry. And that kind of summarizes how I view a lot of women who do OF, women who do pornography. Whereas I feel like a lot of men and people in general, women too, just see that and they think, well, you had your choice and you made it. But considering a lot of these people entering into OF and the porn industry are just turning 18, I don't think we can really say that it is a decision that they just made at an age where they were capable enough to make a smart decision. I mean, again, talking of being just 18, that is another concerning thing to consider when we look at the porn industry and porn consumption. Barely legal is one of the biggest categories online, which is absolutely insane. Reddit actually has a section that is dedicated to posting pictures of women that don't even look of age, and the whole get off there is that they look like they could be underage. And that being such a big category is insane. I mean, you see women on TikTok talking about how they got catcalled more at 16 in their school uniform than they do now at the age of like 20 and 21, just in their regular clothes. And it's like I can't hear any argument that makes one of the categories being barely legal okay. The only thing I ever hear, which doesn't even help their case, is that obviously men are more attracted to younger women because they're more fertile, which is absolute insanity. I'm sorry, you don't actually believe that. You don't find women more attractive younger because you think that you can get them pregnant easier. You don't actually think that. Like they always try and bring it back to biology, but you don't really believe that. Like, I'm sorry, I don't find that true. And I find it interesting that a lot of the beauty standards and alongside the barely legal category, they kind of fit together quite well, and how a lot of the beauty standards now do reflect that of a child more often than not. Now, this isn't me saying that it makes you a child to view, barely legal content, but I do find it strange, and I do think that you have a very strange trail of thought, but I also believe that it is something that is kind of inevitable when it comes to adult content. I feel like men end up going down that pipeline of looking at barely legal content because of things like schoolgirl outfits and this continuous narrative that the older a woman is, the more ran through she is, and the more ran through she is, the more her genitals are going to look different to how they do in. So now I've kind of spoke about some of my beliefs and we've gone into some stats and kind of where I get my opinions from. I thought it would be kind of interesting and definitely productive to talk about some of the arguments I've received in the past month or so when I've been talking about OF and pornography, because I've had some ones that are a little bit more understandable, and then I've had some absolutely idiotic ones that genuinely make me question what society we're actually living in. Personally, I find it difficult to even ever hear an argument made towards why pornography isn't a terrible thing. I find it really concerning and strange when someone tries to die on the hill of saying it's fine. I even disagree when people say it's fine here and there, because at the end of the day, when we come to talking about the degradation of women and how women are treated terribly and how it just promotes the subordination of women, I don't really think it matters whether you watch it once a month or you watch it every day. Watching it every day only makes a difference because you're affecting your body directly and your brain. But in terms of the effect that it has on women, watching it once a month and watching it every day, there's really no difference. So the first argument I always receive is, what if it's empowering for the woman? Now, I actually had to kind of sit and think about this one because there are elements of it that I can understand may be true. Off the bat, I'm like, how the hell can you find that empowering? But I also understand that there are circumstances where you may find it empowering. For example, an argument I often hear is, what if it's, to take control over my body after trauma? Or what if it's just makes me feel good about myself because I've struggled with insecurities? But if we want to talk about the trauma as a starting point and why women then find it empowering to do pornography, what I would begin by saying is, it's interesting that a lot of women are traumatized by some form of SA or rape and actually find solace in selling their body privately on OF and having the control there. Because at the end of the day, the only control you have in that situation, which may make you feel better about trauma that you've gone through, is the fact that OF is an independent company and you are ultimately, in your eyes, working for yourself. But I think another thing that's interesting to remember is that OF is a company made by men, for men. So automatically, I mean, you're under a patriarchal system. So it doesn't matter how much control you think you have in your head, you are still not in control at all. Not to mention the fact that the men that are buying your OF do not see you as empowered. They don't look at you and think, oh, she's doing a great thing. They are just there to beat their meat and explode all over the screen. Honestly, men are not buying OF looking and thinking, she's doing great, isn't she? She's doing great. And how do I know that? Because of men's attitudes towards OF when we look online and see the hate that women get when they do take control over their own body. I know a lot of people will find that offensive. They're quite a controversial take from me there, because I think people are going to tell me, well, how can you say what's empowering for SA victims and trauma victims? But as someone, myself, who has been through trauma many times throughout my life, I can genuinely say that I understand what you're trying to say when it comes to saying what if it's empowering, and I understand that empowerment, you may feel empowered, and I can't argue that, but I mean the clue's in the word really. Empowerment, power. There is no amount of power within you when you are selling your body online, even with OF, because ultimately you are a product to men. And again, this isn't me shaming the women that are doing it. I think a lot of people like to say, so you just hate women, you hate women expressing themselves. I have absolutely no problem with women expressing their sexuality, having loads of sex. That's not the problem. Having sex with men, to me, I'm not really concerned about that. You do you, queen. But it's the act of selling your body online that, to me, I can never understand as being empowering, even if you think it is because of trauma. I mean, what kind of society are we in if an industry that just degrades women, objectifies women, and kind of makes them subordinate to men is actually one that is helping, SA trauma? We should be in a society where women aren't forced to think, well, I need to take control of my own body, so let me join the industry, but in a slightly different way. First of all, we should have better, laws on consent, better education on consent, a better jury system, so that when people are committing these crimes, we actually punish them for it. So that is one argument that I often get, and that is my response to that argument. Again, to conclude, I don't hate OF women. I'm surrounded by women. In my friendship group, I know quite a few women that do it, and I don't hate them. Obviously, it's a difficult one. I have a lot of people saying, so you hate pornography and you hate OF, but you don't hate the women that do it, so ultimately you don't hate it, you tolerate it. And someone said something really interesting to me the other day, and it was basically that you can hate these corporations such as Starbucks and McDonald's for funding the war in Palestine and for funding a genocide, but it doesn't mean I hate the workers that work there just trying to live their life and get their money. I think the differences between misogynists and people that genuinely just hate women and don't like women having, control in the sense that they're making money from OF rather than an industry that is directly ran by men, is that women don't actually need to be working in proximity with a man when it comes to OF. And a lot of men will get angry at this and call women that do OF loads of derogatory terms while simultaneously watching online pornography for free, which is genuinely ironic. I don't think it makes a man a misogynist or sexist to come out and say that they don't like pornography and they don't like OF, but obviously that is meant to be done without shaming the women for doing it, because ultimately a lot of these women are genuinely victims to the work industry because they have no idea what they're getting themselves into, and they assume when they do OF they're going to be earning thousands of pounds. And actually I think a lot of these top OF creators have some form of duty to make sure that they're not promoting it in a way that seems like you can start OF at the age of 18 and make absolute bank, because you can't. Another argument I get, which I kind of just briefly spoke about, is how pornography can at times be ethical. People often say, well, what about pornography where it's like a dominatrix or where it's women in control? I don't think that really changes anything, because ultimately it's still the woman being the object of desire on the screen. It's still the woman that is being employed by a kind of industry that is ran by men. So I can see what people are saying. Do I think that it is black and white, everything on these corn sites is as bad as each other? No, I don't. I think there are levels to it. But ultimately, I don't think you can say that there is such thing as ethical corn, especially when it comes to the effect, like I said, that it does have on men and women's brains in the way that your brain works when you're viewing too much adult content. I don't think there is any such thing as ethical content, because in that case you could say that OF is ethical content. But how can OF be ethical content when men hate OF workers, when men dehumanize OF workers for doing their job without actually criticizing the industry, just criticizing women for being hoes and ran through and for the streets when they're actually doing OF? The next argument I get is that it's not feminist of me to say that pornography is bad because it's a woman's choice, and that if a woman has a choice, surely this is good. Now, I spoke about this before briefly on a TikTok, but I think it's important to remember that not every choice you have as a woman is necessarily good. You know, if I said, oh, here's your choice, you can be a trad wife or you can go into the corn industry and you get to choose, does that make either option particularly great? No. Obviously, a woman has a choice, and unlike a lot of misogynistic people online, I'm never going to say to a woman, you dirty, horrible bitch, for doing it, which is what you see from men predominantly when it comes to women doing these industries. Like I said, I don't personally hate the women that are doing it. I hate the system that makes women think that it is an option that they either should do, have to do, or even just can do. And then another argument that I often receive, which is kind of related, is what if it's the only option for money for that one individual? And this is a really interesting one, because I can often see the argument where people are saying, well, say it's a single mum who's struggling to feed her children, what if her only option is to sell her body online? Obviously, if it meant a woman starving and a baby starving, or selling your body online, you're going to sell your body on. I completely understand that. You know, why do you think prostitution is a thing? Because a lot of the time these women have no other choice. But what I would ask yourself when this question gets thrown around is, what kind of society do we live in where women aren't so hard done by and struggling to make money that they have to sell themselves online to make some extra cash to support their family? What kind of society is it that we can't get help, you know, where is needed from the government? So that our only option is, well, I'm going to have to now sell my body online because that will always somehow work out. It's kind of a weird, ironic question, because it kind of proves my point that what kind of society are we in if that is an option that could work for a woman when she's so hard done by and in living in poverty, that if she sells her body, that could actually give her an income. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing that now they can eat and survive. But that's the problem, I think, when it comes to arguments that are for pornography. A lot of people like to say, but look at this one good thing, this woman got to feed her kids. And it's like, that's not good, that we're in a world where loads of people can't feed themselves, so they have to turn to adult work. That's not a good thing at all. The next point I often get, and the next comment I get, is that I am a radical feminist. Now, something I've been kind of reading into in the past few months or so is kind of where I stand in terms of what kind of feminist I am. And radical feminism is something that I actually for a long time did see myself aligning with. I did see a lot of the takes and I'm like, yeah, that's me. I feel that. Until I kind of stumbled across this ideology that radical feminists are TERFs and they kind of disagree with including trans women in any of the issues, which is ridiculous for me. Because, for example, I think that pornography affects everybody, every woman, including trans women. Trans women are fetishized because of the porn industry. Of course they're involved. Of course they are included. They are fetishized. That is why I have heard so many trans people talk to me about their experiences on apps like Grindr, and it is insane. Like, some of the weirdos these people are meeting on apps like Grindr because of the way that trans women and trans men are viewed. Of course I believe that they are as victim to it as you know, biological women or biological men. So I always, you know, hate that comment about calling me a rad femme, because it always comes hand in hand with calling me a TERF. And I think that trans people are just as affected by pornography as anybody else. So actually, I would kind of see it as intersectional feminism, because it also is interesting to look at kind of how there are quite racist undertones in pornography too, and, you know, different races being fetishized, which is, you know, also a huge, massive problem. Another comment I get is that I hate workers and I hate women, which I did briefly speak about before and explain. Obviously I don't. Obviously I'm a lot more hateful when it comes to women such as Katie Robertson or Bonnie Blue, who I'm hating on not just because they are doing sex work, but because the sex work they are doing is actually harmful to other people. I still believe that people like Bonnie Blue and Katie Robertson are kind of victims to an industry, but I believe that they are also making victims out of other people. You know, one person being a victim of an industry doesn't mean they can't then perpetrate other people and do bad things to other people. When it comes to people like Katie Robertson, who does weird things around her dad and borderline harasses her dad, and then people like Bonnie Blue who are preying on barely legal boys. I can hate them for that, but I don't hate them for being sex workers. That's not my hatred here. And next, another insane take I had was that pornography is needed to help the LGBTQ people and just queer folk in general feel included. And again, I think this kind of goes back to talking about empowerment and what feels good for individuals when it comes to viewing online content or even making content. But what I find really strange is, again, what society are we in when you need a damaging industry that is terrible for your brain, is terrible for women, is terrible for men, to make a certain group of people feel included? Queer people should be included in society and not feel excluded. Full stop. Corn, however, shouldn't be the leading drive to make people feel included. I remember receiving this message and thinking, oh my god, how stupid are we? Okay, you're going to see inclusivity, but how is that any different to straight people seeing inclusivity on corn sites? To me, it just makes absolutely zero sense, and quite honestly, it's just trying to cope. A lot of these takes that I get, for example, that one, I think, you don't even give a shit about that, you just care about not feeling bad about your corn use. And then the last take I get, which is potentially the worst and the most scary take I receive quite a lot, is that if we were to ban corn in certain countries, that the rate would rise. Because a lot of people like to tell me that in the countries where pornography isn't accessible, there is a lot more, which is a crazy thing to say in defense of an industry that is damaging for women. Oh, if we don't allow this damaging industry, which kind of objectifies women, then women will actually get raped. It's like we're placing blame on women wanting the industry not to exist as a reason to then go, well, that's why you got raped. So maybe if you let men jack off to you and objectify you, then you wouldn't have been raped in real life. It's like we're being made to pick between being objectified in real life and being objectified online, and as if any is really better than the other. I mean, the fact that there are genuinely men that believe that you deserve to have some special treatment, otherwise you're going to go out and just pillage and assault women because you haven't got access to pleasure yourself just without it is insane. I don't know where this whole kind of narrative has gone that you can't just jack off at home alone, and if you can't just jack off and come to that conclusion, so to speak, without watching pornography, again, you're proving my point of what an issue it is. Okay, that was my few arguments that I often receive. I know there probably will be people with some more points. Feel free to make them in the comments below. I'll reply to some of them if they seem worthy of replying to, but if you say some dumbass stuff, I'll just ignore you, because often, as you've just seen, so many takes are so brain dead. Just go and do some research, genuinely. And again, just a conclusion, I guess. I understand this is a very divisive subject, and I find it quite hard to come across as not a when I talk about this, but quite frankly, when it comes to pornography, there are so many stats to show that it's terrible. There are so many facts and figures and kind of studies done to show that it's bad. And it's not even an argument to be made that it doesn't affect women, because we know that it does. And the only argument I ever hear that it's okay sometimes is when, you know, it's OF and women get to choose to do it or whatever. But I never really hear any arguments that are genuine logic. It's always, but that's just your opinion. Yeah, my opinion is that I don't want women to be objectified. I don't want women to be dehumanized. I don't want women to suffer at the hands of attitudes that are being fed by pornography, including violence and lines of consent being blurred. And I don't know. It's a really strange one. I think society's low-key doomed. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying this, because now I know I'm going to make it worse. But even being online for a year, I've already got sites made directly to kind of luring people in to believe that I have got leaked videos online. I saw this one site that said that you can undress Katiclyzm with AI. And like, this is what I mean. The industry's only going to get more and more worse with AI coming out, with technology getting, you know, more and more impressive. It's just, I dread to imagine what's going to be online of me in the next 5 years. It's actually quite terrifying. It's not something I like to think about. And again, people are like, if you don't like it, don't watch it. But it's not just that, it's the effect it has on women in general, women in their day-to-day lives as a result of it. I mean, I can't, you know, even walk down the road from the gym without being catcalled, as, you know, a lot of you women will know what it's like just being a woman in general, and a lot of these attitudes do come from the porn industry. And I think although I genuinely don't have an argument of what we could do now about it, I think if we were in a society where it had never existed, we would be in a much better place. Yes, I don't have an idea of what we could do particularly, because obviously you ban stuff, it's just going to come back. It's like anything, you can't just completely erase stuff off the internet. People will always be able to find it. So to be honest, I don't really know what the answer is. Maybe better regulation, maybe even just the base start of making sure that there is better kind of proof needed to prove you're 18 for going on these sites. I genuinely don't know. That's an interesting thing that I would like to hear other people kind of give their opinion on. But I've been talking for genuinely an hour, which is quite impressive. And I'm not surprised because I have so much to yap about this. But if you enjoyed watching this, leave a comment, subscribe. It's not always this serious and long. If you got this far, I'm impressed. Genuinely. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you hopefully when I'm yapping a little bit less.